so good.
All right, what do you think? Should we get started?
Give me 1 minute. Okay, I'm just joining that channel. Yeah, just give me 1 minute.
Yep, no worries. Just pinging everybody where the questions will be posted once it opens.
All right, let's cut them loose.
All right, I'll open the channel now. So this is general. They can ask all sorts. Here we go.
Okay, guys. Thanks for joining us. We decided to have another general AMA. Tina kind of explained this in the announcement, but every time we are deciding on having an AMA, we spend quite a bit of time sort of bouncing email chains around trying to decide what the subject should be. And sometimes there's a lot of different reasons how we choose the subject. Sometimes it's based on how ready we think the subject is for AMA, like that we are locked down enough to answer everything. And sometimes it might feel like it doesn't have enough meat to carry like a full hour, like twice in a day. So that kind of determines things. And then we've pooled subjects together. This time we went general just because it's been several months since we did the initial general AMAs, and since then there's been a lot of people who have pre-ordered and maybe weren't here or didn't see them or hear them or have a chance to ask questions. I think it's also fair to say though that I'm gonna kind of approach today's AMA just a tiny bit different. I might just sort of, instead of rifling through as many questions as possible, I might sort of wax poetic just a little bit, just because I think the audience too is, there's certain people that are like, community interaction type of people, and then there's people that don't, and so even though there's been thousands of pre-orders since we last did the AMA, there's 1,400 people in here. There was probably around 1,000 in there last time, so there's also a good chance that it's a similar audience asking the questions. So we'll just kind of move along with those things in mind. And first question: what are your thoughts on Epic Store exclusivity for Mechwarrior 5? I've been expecting the question. I know lately there's been a few people tweeting at me, kind of, I wouldn't say baiting, but just sort of asking, like, is this going to be on Steam? And I think the question's really geared towards finding out, if there's any kind of Epic Store exclusivity. I will do some general thoughts on exclusivity. First off, I love what Epic's doing personally, because it's a biased view, I suppose, as a developer, not necessarily as a full consumer view, but the rates and what they're charging developers and royalty rates and such it's massive. I mean, it's massively different. It makes the possibility of your game being viable and making money so much greater. And so to me, that's an extremely positive thing for independent developers. And yeah, I wish Steam would be more aggressive at matching those types of rates. Thus far, they haven't at smaller games, or even just overall. So those are my general thoughts on it. Exclusivity for Mechwarrior 5. I mean, I'm mostly coming at this from a developer standpoint. Again, for a lot of reasons, it could be great for Macquarie 5 based on the rates and things that are in the Epic Store, and for us as a small developer to get that much more royalty per unit is really immeasurable. At this point in time, there's no plans for that though. Just to be really clear, this pre-order is listed as a Steam key, and I understand that other games have done similar things and then moved over. So I understand that people would say that doesn't mean necessarily that it won't. But I guess all I can say is that right now there's no plans to make Macquarie 5 an Epic Store exclusivity, and that's as simply as I can put it. It's Steam at the moment. We're planning on releasing it again on Steam, and we're actually also planning on releasing it for GOG. I think this could be more the official announcement for that. We haven't really done that yet. I think we've hinted around it, but we've done GOG Galaxy integration, and I've been talking to those guys over there at the GOG for a long time, and so it looks like you'd have your choice of the two keys at the moment. And those are the planned platforms at the moment, and the game will be for sale on a lot of other platforms too. But those will be mostly at the moment. The plan is that those would just be like Steam key distribution type things, as well as our own portal, which would then allow the choice of those two different key options. So that's where everything sits now, and that's the way it'll probably go. Thanks for the question. The next question was the exact same thing. I think he says, let's be blunt on this one. Are there any plans? I think I answered that pretty bluntly for you. Right at this moment, there is no plans. When will there be a modding AMA? I think we can do that one pretty soon. I mean, I guess, well, pretty soon is relative. To some of you, that means next week. From me, that means, I would guess kind of more like June-ish. So that's the best I can do for you on that one at the moment. I think I kind of answered this next one. Jaden Hayes says, are there currently any plans or possibilities to expand availability of Macquarie 5 to other distribution platforms such as GOG, Windows Store, Humble Bundle, or EGS? Again, Steam, GOG, for sure. I do expect things like Humble Bundle and those sort of things that distribute keys, that allow the distribution of keys to other platforms. So yeah, I think the answer there is you will see it around. Okay. Are there any plans to have some of the biggest Merck organizations as factions? Okay, so hopefully I answered this correctly. Maybe not in the way that you're thinking. The factions that you take contracts with are essentially the 5 great houses, and then a timeline would allow for FR to come into existence, of course. And there's the story missions, which are different factions that you take missions with. There isn't we haven't gone bananas here where there's dozens and dozens of different people that you have faction with or take missions with. There's really the great house factions, and of course that doesn't mean that you're not fighting someone you might recognize, or whether that be a story mission or something along those lines, but you're just not going to be taking missions with dozens of different people. Smutty, are there any plans to allow terrain such as ice, gravel, mud, and so on to affect mech movement, mobility, agility, or is that limited to collapsed buildings and their slow zones? I think at the moment our plan is just to limit that to slow zones around destructible objects. Certainly we could, but for me, it's a lower priority to kind of the fun factor guarantee just isn't there really, making someone feel like they're slipping on ice or stuck in the mud. We've all played games like that and moments like that. I think they have their moments, but I wouldn't necessarily want someone to get into a biome and then be frustrated the whole time because they are always constantly slowed like they're in the mud. So I think we're going to limit that to destructible buildings. Okay, so Hoto here has been asking this on Twitter. It's a good question. It's about the specs for Mechwarrior 5. As you can imagine, a game goes through so many levels of its performance optimizations late in development. Alpha and even beta phases where there's so much optimization going where you truly find out what your specs are or what kind of PCs you can expect to get good performance on. So, naturally we'd love to be able to, put off a decision like that as long as we can. But I understand someone is certainly not looking to pre-order a game that they don't know if it's going to run well on their PC. So certainly we have respected that as well. If you don't feel comfortable pre-ordering because of that, that's of course fine. I will say though, you're right. We need to do a proper follow-up on this. So I'm just gonna say Matt and Tina, make a note. This is a follow-up item for Carrie and the team in QA. And it's the 10th of April now. We should endeavor to obviously just get that out as soon as we can before the April 30th pre-order ends. And I know now we've got these countdowns for the Mechs happening and stuff like that. So we've already missed kind of that first deadline. But again, we'll try our best. It's just difficult because we want to make sure that we are giving as accurate specs as possible. So we will have a follow-up item. And hopefully within a week or so, we will put something out there so someone could feel comfortable enough to know that they're ready for the game's release or whatnot. Thank you.
Note taken.
All right, make a note. With destructible buildings, will we no longer be able to hop from building top to building top in Mechwarrior 5? No, that's not true. You will be able to. It just kind of depends on the type of building. Certainly, if there's smaller buildings that are not meant to take the weight of a mech, or the tonnage of your mech, you will fall through the roof. But there are other bigger buildings, and even in the MechCon demo, you could see those buildings in the base there were not fully collapsible. So in that style, because they were like shoulder to head height of, say, an Atlas, they're not fully destructible. And you can jump on the top of the roof and you can go from roof to roof and do all those fun things. Is it possible for you to start posting 4K screenshots? Yes, I would say it is. First, we need to get Mike to order the right monitors. We have a few 4K monitors and TVs and things around the office, but it's not like every dev station doesn't have 4K yet in the studio. We did order like a half dozen more 4K monitors that turned out to be not 4K or something like that. It's a bit of a mix-up. So yeah, we could do that. That's kind of on you, Matt. You'd have to, in the meantime, before you actually get a 4K monitor at your workstation, I guess you'd have to snap some screens from the the boardroom or the pod or somewhere a little bit. Or QA. Ricky's got one there too. So yeah, we just need a few more 4K screens around.
I actually take them in higher than what my desktop setting is by using a modifier on the execution command for a screenshot.
Okay, so you answer the question. Can we post 4K screens or not?
I'm just looking at what the resolution is, and then I'll try and match that from now on.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the question. Raz had asked if there's any chance we'll see HUD or variation, or we will see the HUD or variations of it that was presented back in the 2016 gameplay demo. No, we've answered this a few times to AMAs. Just to be clear, like, we're going to have our hands full just like getting the game done. And that's the world of game development. We're going to get the game done as high quality as possible and ship it. This is a mod target for all you modders out there. That's one of the staples of modding. I'm sure people will come up with, they can do whatever you want. So there might be all sorts of HUD mods out there that do things that people feel are better for them, HTAL and all sorts of various things. We just didn't find that that the 2016 demo HUD was very workable or fun. It was kind of a neat concept, but the concept was that the picture of the weapon was sort of in the general vicinity of where that weapon was on your mech. Maybe it could have worked with a lot more time and iteration on it, but that is definitely an area where we went back to the tried and true classic type of HUD for a Mechwarrior game and decided to make sure that we had something working well, and focused on other areas of the game that needed more, high risk taking sort of development. How hard is it to get new mechs? I'm not sure how to answer that. It's not overly hard. I mean, it's earning money, so I guess it kind of depends on how well you're playing the game, and not just in your aiming and shooting, but how well you're choosing your contracts and making sure you're taking contracts that you can complete well without significant damage and all those sort of things. If you've got money, you can buy a mech. I mean, that's not going to be a guarantee. You could be in a system without, potentially, where there's not a mech for sale, or not a mech that you want. You might have to search a little bit as you fly around and to the various systems. But if you've earned some money and you've got enough C-bills to buy a particular tonnage of chassis, that should be, then it's attainable. It's like you can go to the market, you can get a mech, you can get a pilot, you can immediately become a bigger unit at that point and take on those extra costs.
I can answer the next question there from NFS Racer. I think he's referring to the reward mechs that we have counting down right now. Those mechs will be injected to accounts on May 21st. So the Catapult, Warhammer, Marauder, and the King Crab.
Okay, I kind of got lost. Which one was that one?
Right underneath the How Hard is New Mechs, NFS Racer.
Okay, yeah. Backfish. How will co-op mode work? LAN or world? Both. I mean, I suppose the basic method is more of a worldwide approach, because you're on Steam, for example, and you've got your Steam's friends list, and you can connect up with that friends list to play co-op. But at MechCon, we had the 4 pods connected, and we played that co-op match of the MechCon demo. That was set up like old school LAN style. So that kind of old LAN style method is it's workable. You can do it. You just have, it's like old school style. You connect up to the IPs, and away you go. So yeah, there's lots of options there. You in the future, LAN party wise or whatnot, you can certainly do the LAN method. What will jump jet scaling be like compared to MWO on the tabletop? Will distances be more in line of the? No, I would say that our intention, and that we've been pushing for, and we've had some balance passes here lately, is to make jump jets fun. So I think we feel like jump jets in Mechwarrior Online are not always as fun as we'd like them to be. That there's limitations via balance and jump sniping and all the various things we've gone through over the years, but we're definitely not letting any of that weigh us down when it comes to Mechwarrior 5. Like, we don't care about jump sniping. We don't really care about any of that stuff because this is a single player game or co-op. All of you are playing together against the AI. It's PvE. So there's no balance concerns in that regard. So it's about fun. So it's not going to be a circus, but it's going to be something that feels really great. So if it's like, if it needs to jump a certain way to feel really fun and great, then that's what it is. And there's really no looking at. I mean, okay, there's probably a little. I mean, Dave Bradley, who does a lot of these number stuff, he's been working on Mechwarrior 9 for like the last 8 years. So I'm sure he can't help himself but to kind of consider like, well, here's how many meters a spider jumps and whatnot, and that's always in his mind. But again, just as long as it doesn't weigh him down, and making sure that it's a really fun feeling effect. Any idea when you'll start allowing press previews, hands-on time with the alpha, beta out in the wild? Yeah, I have a bit of an idea. This is pretty standard process in the industry. It's not until fairly close to launch. So press and media get review copies, and that's, just think of it as kind of like mid-August-ish, and maybe like up to like a week to 10 days-ish before the game releases. You get some sort of like maybe some previews coming out, and then their embargo would be that the reviews are hitting like the day of the game's releasing. So that's all we really have plans for at the moment. We don't really have any plans to get some press like the actual alpha build in the summer or something like that. No, just pushing for the final. So you're probably looking at like a late August to very early September kind of preview leading into reviews. Okay, what has been the greatest challenge in the development process of Mechwarrior 5 so far? Boy, I like the question a lot, and I have no idea how to answer, because I mean, it's just so many things. I mean, so Piranha Games has been around for almost 20 years, and we've been making games for a really long time. But we also just spent the last, 8 years from August making Mechwarrior Online, an online live services style game. Mechwarrior 5 is obviously very different. It's a more of a traditional full product type of release, and so you have to hit a much higher level of completion, quote unquote, MVP before you can release the game. So there's been a lot of challenges. I mean, sure, some of the things that come to mind are things that are unique to a single player game, like say the AI systems. But also, I would say, if I had to single it out, probably front end metagame type systems, front end UI systems. They're very challenging, as you guys know. And Macquarie Online, thank goodness for Macquarie Online, because we went through, as everyone remembers, people have been around for Macquarie Online for a long time. We went through. I mean, there's an ongoing joke, right, about what do we used to call it? UI. Was it UI 2.0, or like what was the terminology used again?
Yeah, UI 2.0.
Yeah, so we went through, saw these revisions, and it's still not perfect, but we've learned so many lessons, and at least we've been allowed to apply those, and even being able to apply those. Mechwarrior 5's front end experience is big. It's still a very big front end system. You have, you already know how the game plays, and you guys understand about the ability to travel and take your contracts and manage your expenses, and it's just a lot there. So that was a big challenge for sure. We still have a lot of work to do there, and so that's been one of the bigger challenges. And then again, like AI systems and a bunch of things. But it's just hard making games, and it only gets harder as the years go by, because the bar just gets higher, and minimum expectations of quality continues to rise. And it kind of goes back to the notion of, if you look at the classic games in Mechwarrior 1, 2, 3, 4, it's like, how do you judge a game, right? This is where we get a little philosophical. Is it truly compared apples to apples, or is it more about the impact a particular game had on its era, right? Because if you look at Macquarie 2, which is one of the most maybe probably the most popular, most famous of all of them, Mech 2 Mercs, etc. And you guys know how much they've inspired us in our game development, our game design. But if you dust them off today and play them, are they fun still? Sure, debatable to the person, but they don't really. Even me, as a monster fan of those games, they don't necessarily hold up by today's standards. So the point is that it's just gotten so much harder, and so when we release our game, it's much more judged against the current era, right? It's not judged against the past Macquarie games so much, a little bit in its design and functionality, but primarily it'll be judged more along how it fits in with today's games. So anyhow, there's a bit of offshoots there, but hopefully that answered your question somewhat. Hey, Zolin. Question about the Mech Lab. Will it be similar to MWO, limited mount points, etc., or will it be more restrictive, Mech 3, 4, or will it be open? Well, it's not open. It's not like MWO. It's kind of its own thing. I'm sure if you looked at all the Mechwarrior games over time, it's going to have bits of that one, bits of that, this one, and that one. And the key design goals of Mech5 Mercenaries was to make sure that we had a game where the metagame, in order for the metagame to work as well as we wanted it to work, and to be balanced as well as we wanted it to be balanced, that meant that the free market system, as you travel around the inner sphere and go from Lao space to Davian space, and from the year 3015 to year 3049, that the market dynamically changes and that the mechs on the market are actually meaningful. So when you see a variant that you've just spent who knows how many hours of the game playing, and you've gone through 20 years of your career, and then for the very first time, just as a bad example, perhaps like a Hunchback, whatever, 4G that shows up in the market. It's like, oh my God, I've never seen one of those in the market. I love that mech. Like, I got to have it. And that means that our mech lab, it doesn't have, to be more fine, there's no inflated hard points for sure. It's not an MWO style where there's inflated hard points where we say, well, let's give it some extra energies in this area. Let's give it some extra ballistics in this area. It has the weapon hard points that it has. And you can take those weapons off. If you don't need them, you can add armor, you can add ammo, you can add heat sinks, you can take heat sinks off, you can take ammo off if you don't use it. You can do a lot of shifting around of your battle mech, but when it comes to the weapons, in order to make sure that the other variants still remain viable, you're not taking off, say, the AC-20 and putting on an AC-10 and therefore freeing up so that you can put large lasers instead of medium lasers in other slots. No, the weapons need to be replaced with similar weapon types, but you do have an entire pool of manufacturers and which have different characteristics and different, I guess, quirks, so that you can customize them significantly and make sure that after you customize, you can always, if you don't want the small laser in your head because you're just never using it, you can take some extra armor or ammo for that. But when you do run into that variant that is known to have a different weapon combination, then it'll be very important and viable for you to get that variant so that you can create different builds, rather than MWO, which is really great in so many ways because you do have kind of a larger amount of freedom in how you build the mech. You also run into a lot of situations where we're releasing a mech into Mechwarrior Online, and there's always a lot of common refrain that it's like, hey, but we already have mechs that do all of this just as well. Like, you can take this mech and strip it down this way and build it, and essentially make that mech that you're releasing. So why bother? And truth be told, we've kind of been in that sort of state with Macquarie Online for a really long time. So again, we did feel it was a little important to restrict the mech lab a little bit more in making sure that Again, the mechs and all the variants on the marketplace were needed and different in their own way. So other than that, it's slot-based system like you guys are used to. You can slide around your heat sinks and your ammo and adjust that armor and take off weapons you're not using for additional tonnage, so on and so forth. So that's hopefully it gives you a pretty good idea of what you can do. Okay. Will we see the return of proper collision knockdown, DFA? We've talked about this a few times in the past. It's still on a nice to have list. We've kind of answered definitively that there won't be knockdowns. Certainly not with initial release. And the biggest thing there is the animation work goes up by about 10x. I mean, this isn't like BattleTech, which was when you smash them, they have one, canned animation that can almost be used on any mech in the game, really, and they fall onto their back on the one square. I mean, you can imagine mechs moving at all sorts of speeds, fast, locust, everything, and then having collisions and having to have all that handled by physics and falling down and ragdolls looking good, and then all having stand-up animations and such. So it's cool, but that's not something that'll be there for initial release for sure on the knockdowns. Collision, of course, there is a lot better, collision, although that's so there will be, you will be smashing up against, other mechs, and there's definitely a chance that could, it could result in collision noises and even damage. And then that kind of same answer applies to the DFA. It's not like a sort of a canned DFA type moment, but mechs do have jump jets. They do, ram into each other, so there could be damage applied in those situations. But I guess it won't be like you just successfully DFA rolled and now the head pops and that guy dies for sure, or something along those lines. But it's more emergent type gameplay, rather than dice roll style, I guess would be one way of answering it. Gagus, does anyone ever test if the game build runs on Linux through Wine? UE usually works really well. No, I would say probably not. I don't know if we'll find time to do so. So I guess if it works with UE, there's a chance it'll work with ours, but I cannot promise you that we will test that or make sure it does or anything like that. Okay. How in depth are the company management and metagame contracts, repairs, arms markets, and personal management aspects of Mech? Well, pretty in depth. Probably not as in depth as a lot of this audience would like. That's how I usually find this audience, our audience. Generally speaking, we want a lot more of that than your average guy out there. And so on the one hand, this is certainly a game that I'm trying to make so it can be as big as the past Macquarie games. Past Macquarie games always sold 1 million units, and I think that's based in some regard on this, this quality and all these other things, but also just being accessible, so it can't be extreme. But there's a lot there. It's certainly complicated enough from my point of view. There's you definitely search for contracts. You do repair your mech. You do go to the markets, and you do manage your personnel and hiring and firing of your pilots. And I can go a little further. You do travel. You do manage the expenses on a month-to-month basis of your entire unit. So yes, there's a lot there. I think it's enough if we can really dial in and tune what we have, the metagame we have, to be really well balanced, and there's a lot there. Will there be monetization similar to what is seen in MWO? I think he would probably mean things like buying premium time or cockpit items or badges and titles and all sorts of things like that. I would say for the vast majority of that question would be no. There isn't really, most of the systems don't exist. There's no concept of premium time or even the notion of mech packs per se, not in the way that Macquarie Online does it anyhow. So I think you can. I don't want to rule out the fact that there will be DLC content, or hopefully there will be. If there's DLC content, that means that we've got a viable product in the market that people are enjoying, is selling well, and they want more content. But it's really more traditional sense. So there isn't like an in-game marketplace. You guys have heard me talk about marketplace in game, but that's the game market, right? Like that's where you go buy medium lasers and heat sinks and mechs with your CBL currency. There's no notion of like a hard currency, like an MC hard currency, or like an in-game market where you buy loot boxes and things like that. So it'll be more along the lines of traditional stuff. So like maybe there'll be a DLC pack, which is some additional mech chassis that you buy, and then like the whole campaign in the game has those included in it. Or maybe there'll be more expansion pack type DLC. So I don't know. I think right now we're a small team. We're focused on shipping the game, so there will be DLC options, but it's important to clarify that it's not like an in-game MC hard currency marketplace type game. That doesn't exist in Mechwarrior 5. Is the Roughneck going to be in Mechwarrior 5 or perhaps other original mechs? Yeah, I mean, our mentality is that we created them and we like them, and if they suit the timeline of the game, our goal is to have them in the game. So I'll just leave you with that answer, just so there's a little bit of a tease there. But yeah, sure, to us, they're precious. If not secret, how many people already pre-ordered the game? I guess I'm not going to tell you, but I guess I'd answer it like this. We've been very happy with it. It's not to the same level and degree as, say, like Macquarie Online's Founders Program, but that was a very different era. As you guys know, it was kind of the beginning of the era. In some way, Macquarie Online was sort of a trailblazer there, really, with its Founders Program, and had over 5 million US in 90 days or something like that. And then of course, Star Citizen kind of picked up and blew that out of the water. But for a while there, we were sort of the biggest pre-order of its type there'd ever really been. And so it's not that kind of big, but I'd say for this era of people's desire to not pre-order games, and most people kind of swearing off pre-ordering games, I'd say it's very strong for that kind of era. So, happy, and thank you for your support, and thanks for getting word out there. And definitely, the pre-order is good. It helps us, helps a small studio like ours, a game like ours. And as you guys know, we're self-developing and publishing and doing our best to make a strong game. So, and thanks for all your support. Okay, Sarna.net's Mechwarrior 5 page already has a list of MWO mechs that were in production used during the Mechwarrior 5 timeline. However, not all lore mechs from this time period are yet in MWO. Far from it, in fact. How good are the chances that we'll see non-MWO mechs that are likewise appropriate for the Mechwarrior 5 timeline, such as the longbow from Mechwarrior 4? Well, I like the question, and I'd love to just say, you bet, absolutely. It really just comes down to a timeline and development and making sure that we're focusing on things that are super important to make a great game. So, as you can imagine, as awesome as mechs are, we already were sitting on like 1,000 chassis from Macquarie Online when it comes to the variants. So it's not going to hit a super high priority to say, well, let's also make sure we dedicate art resources to create other mechs that are not in Macquarie Online. It's more about making sure that the mechs we have and that we choose are great in Mechwarrior 5, and the damage states are great, and the animations are great, and they play great. And so I would say, just to be honest, like unlikely at initial launch, but likely as if things are well and the game is successful, more as a DLC type options. That's the way I would answer that for now. Jaden Hayes, will Mechwarrior 5 have translated audio or maybe video as well? I'm thinking about French, German, and so on. I would say unlikely. It's a stretch for a studio of our size just to make sure that we're not forgetting about making sure the game is, localized, targeting at least a minimum of eFigs, English, French, Italian, German, Spanish, and in its text form. I would say that's very likely that's as far as we'd be able to go. Will we be able to salvage hero unique variants? I'm going to leave this one dangling. It's a great question. Let's move on. Will we see in-depth electronic warfare, passive active sensors? I'm feeling a little unqualified to answer this properly. We did an AMA on AI, and really, again, just what I will say about it is just keep in mind this isn't MWO. This isn't about player versus player. It's about player versus the AI. So in some ways, these questions become a little bit, well, they're not the wrong question. They're just, their interpretation is totally different. So when you're doing that against another player, it means something entirely different than when you're doing against the AI. Because when you're doing against the AI, it's really just a presentation to the player that they're behaving in a way that you would expect them to. So that's all I'm going to say about that for now. I think we maybe have to have another AI AMA, which I think is a good idea. I think that was one of our stronger AMAs, and there were some really great questions. And so we can maybe ask that again a little later. Do you plan to retrofit popular Mechwarrior 5 maps back into Mechwarrior Online? Oh, that's kind of a cool question. I'm not sure I'd ever really thought about that. So there's no plans on doing that at the moment. I guess, could it work? Is it viable? Well, I don't know if there'd be a map that you play in Mechwarrior 5 that you'd say like, wow, we got to have that in MWO, because, I mean, they're so different. There is the kind of handcrafted levels for the story missions, and then, of course, there's the generated levels. I suppose it's possible that there's a particular generated level that really everyone loves and thinks like, oh, this would be fun in Mechwarrior Online. But then again, it wouldn't be developed with any kind of symmetrical gameplay in mind. So I think it's kind of unlikely that there'll be a level in Mechwarrior 5 that people think, wow, that would make a perfect Mechwarrior Online map. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe if you think about the MechCon mission, it's kind of got two starting points culminating in the city in the middle. So I like where your head's at. I guess we'll just have to kind of see how that one goes. Any chance mobile field bases will make any kind of appearance for longer campaigns? We do have the notion of longer campaign. I don't know that we have the mobile field base in mind yet, though. Although we do have that kind of vehicle type in MWO, so I think it's an option. So thanks for some thoughts there, but we do have some longer campaigns. No melee combat. Kind of a similar answer to what I gave on the fall down animations. I know a lot of people won't necessarily agree with this, or they won't like the answer. They'll think it's mostly a cop-out. In order to make a first-person game, or if you're playing a third-person, same thing, look really good with melee combat, there's about 2 decades of really awful first-person melee stuff out there. It can be done well in today's day and age, I'm sure, but you can also probably respect that as a development team, then we would have to commit probably significant resources to that. Like, you'd probably have to commit like a full 6 months to a year with a good portion of your team to make sure that works really well and is actually fun and doesn't look ridiculous. So no, the priority was everything else. I won't even get into it. So there's no melee damage. Well, beyond general, you can collide. There are collisions. You will take damage by stomping over turrets or if you're smashing into things. So there is all that, but you're not going to be taking your fist and swinging it in a, pressing a key and watching an arm kind of swing out in front of your cockpit kind of thing. DLC pack, perhaps, huh? I don't know. Will you be able to run your own private dedicated servers? Again, I think that's just kind of a bit of a holdover question from a mentality that we've all been in for so long playing Mechwarrior Online that Macquarie 5 is different. I'm not sure that really the concept is needed because Mechwarrior 5 is a single player game. And if you're playing co-op, then I guess in a sense you are running your dedicated server because your computer is the host machine. So you're inviting 1, 2, or 3 friends to come and play with you in co-op, and you become the host for those players. So in a sense, you're kind of on the dedicated server. But I think the question is probably asked more in the notion or thinking about kind of old school games with GameSpy where, you jump into a lobby together and stuff, or there's a matchmaker, or none of those concepts exist in MechWarrior 5. It's simply a single player game, and which has co-op, which you invite your players more peer-to-peer style to your game, which you become the host for. The question here about Steam Workshop mod support still on schedule when we get access regarding the original models and textures for editing purposes. Certainly still our plans for Steam Workshop and for modding in general. I mean, this obviously the Unreal Engine is very moddable. So certainly this is like any game, one of those things that'll be handled when we make sure we have the game ready for market. So to temper expectations, I don't think this is something where you can expect to get your hands on all the modding stuff like months in advance. We think about it more along the lines of in and around release, and probably even us putting more effort into the ease of modding in the weeks following release to make sure that it's in great shape for as people are finishing their games and campaigns and building up interest around modding. So think of it more as the fall time. Technical questions. Is scaling accurately mapped in Unreal units, centimeters? So a mech would be around 1,000 units centimeters high. I have no idea. All I can say is scaling, I believe, came over from MWL. So all the mechs to each other are scaled similarly. And again, for a single player game, that's going to be totally perfect. Any lingering concerns that someone had around the rescale with like maybe the light mechs not being as small as they should be like back in the day, not an issue when it comes to a single player game. Everything's scaled like MWL to each other. Now, how that equates into Unreal units, I need someone else to answer that question, so I'm going to have to leave you hanging on that one. Another question, system requirements, not yet, but we're working on that. So appreciate the reminder again. Matt has made a note. Is VR still a long-term goal, and will you kill cockpit walking too? Yeah, it's still a long-term goal. It's still something that I think is really cool, and there's still momentum out there. There's still news about new VR headsets, and I've heard recent kind of waves that shoot, what's that game called? the Sony game, the space exploration one that recently added VR headsets, and everyone's quite excited about it. So I think it's looking, like that market's still kind of hanging around. So for us, again, it would be almost certainly kind of more of a post, No Man's Sky. Thank you. A post-release type of effort, almost certainly. But Unreal Engine has very good default support, and I would say that it shouldn't be like a excessive wait if this is something we want to work on post-release. It's and I think you'd think of it more as a cockpit view peripheral. I wouldn't expect us to rework the game when it comes to the entire front end experience or anything. It'd be more along the lines of when I'm launching into a mission in my cockpit, I have this cockpit experience where it's free looking around through the windows, and rather than having to press control and move your mouse to kind of look out that window, you would free look. So still interested, still think there's a strong possibility, but almost certainly a post-launch type of effort. Is there plans for dogs to be in the game, and can you pet them? I would suggest there's probably not going to be any petting. There's not that much of a character interaction aspect of the game. But running around your mech and seeing a dog, I wouldn't rule it out. We're still looking for ways to make the environments come alive, and that comes with maybe like animals or people and stuff. They're kind of more stretch goals, secondary to the main gameplay aspect. But yes, doggos would be cool. More depth on co-op features, number of players, campaign, instant action. Yeah, it's 4-player co-op. So you play the game with up to 3 AI lance-mates, right? It's a lance-based game. So as you hire pilots, you can have 1, 2, or up to 4, well, up to 3 AI lance-mates go out into a mission with you. You have the option of replacing those AI teammates with real humans. And yes, you can invite them into your campaign to run through the campaign with you. But there is also the instant action screen, which I anticipate would probably be the larger, maybe not, depends on the player, but maybe the larger aspect of co-op play, because everyone kind of gets into the campaign and gets into their own world. But instant action there's a large amount of freedom there. I mean, the notion is that you can invite up to 3 friends, set up a mission, like set up everything about it, the type of mission it is, the difficulty of the missions, kind of the enemy forces you're going to face, set up all the parameters of it and launch that mission together and just play an instant action mission together in co-op. So that could turn out to be the largest form of co-op play, maybe, that friends play with each other. Hey Zon, I'm not gonna answer will MWO see an Unreal refit away from CryEngine? Not an MWO AMA, but I've answered this in the past. I would say it's unlikely. And we'll see how well Mechwarrior 5 does. If it's a runaway hit, then who knows? Usually success changes all plans. So we'll see. Okay, sorry, a longer question there from Nene. I want to make sure I understood it if I was going to read it out loud, but everyone can probably see it. So yeah, the Living Legends team contacted us, and they're like, what's up? We want to update the mod to a newer engine. How do you guys feel about that? And I was like, well, I think it's awesome. The only really way we can sort of stay out of your way is you can, make it Macquarie 5, make it a mod for Macquarie 5. And they were super cool about that and jumped on it. Really happy to hear about that. I know there's been lots of misinformation out there over the years about our relationship with them and such, which 99% of it's really 100% untrue. But I was glad to hear from them. Cool that they're getting excited about this. The question is, do you have to use Mechwarrior 5 official mod tools in order to be considered an official mod or be able to run with the Mechwarrior 5. I hope I'm not answering this incorrectly. I'm going to just put a tiny caveat out there to make sure I'm not wrong here, but I don't think this matters at all. No, I mean, there's no. Well, Mechwarrior, you can make a mod for Mechwarrior 5 in almost any fashion that that works with Unreal games. There's using the Unreal editor and putting out modifying pack files or whatever it is to kind of create your mod. I would suggest that you don't really need to think about it like so much custom MechWarrior 5 modding tools. I mean, there won't be very much in the way of like super specific modding tools. It's really going to be just Unreal Engine modding methodologies. And then the only things that come into question at all really is that we're still kind of talking about as well. Does the artwork you use in your mods, you can create all your own artwork, of course, 100% from scratch, and bring your stuff, models over from Living Legends or whatever, and that's all wonderful. And you can use any of the art that ships with MechWarrior 5. There might be some question, though, of, say, pulling other artwork out of course, other games and bring it into MechWarrior 5. So there's more questions along those lines than anything. From a modding standpoint, again, it's more, think of it more along the lines of Unreal Engine modding methodologies is what you'll be using, and that they won't necessarily be exclusive to MechWarrior 5. It's just how you mod Unreal Engine games. So I know we need to have that modding game. Hopefully that gives you at least enough of an answer to understand that, yeah, if you have modding methods that you've used in other Unreal Engine games, I'm sure that that's going to be perfectly fine. Did PGI develop their own foliage, or did they grab some from an asset store? I think we were creating all of our own from scratch, and we created a foliage system. We did integrate SpeedTree a little while back, and there is some. I think there's some assets that come with SpeedTree, so I can't give you a perfect answer there, but I think it's primarily created by us. But there might be some from more of a. I'm not sure if I would call it asset store so much as with tools like SpeedTree. So, yeah, I'll have to kind of ask the questions there, but I think that answers your question, hopefully. Well, that's a tough question. Basically, Inter is asking are you going to feel like you're making big waves in the inner sphere? And although I think, based on the tone of your question, you'd like me to say you're going to make waves. No, you won't make waves. You have a main story arc that you play out with, and you'll certainly make waves in that main story arc. But when it comes to the inner sphere, when this planet was conquered by these people and this border changed in that way and these events happened in that fashion, and just all of that will be uninfluenced by you and your actions in the inner sphere. Think of it more like Mechwarrior 1. Stuff's happening, timeline's moving on. You're just an ant in a sea that have your own super important storyline going on in your world, and you're working for all the great houses and doing wonderful things, but you will not be changing the tide of history. Total number of chassis, Mechwarrior 5. We've given estimates before. It's in the neighborhood of 50 unique chassis with their variants, and I think that's kind of up in the couple hundred range. So that's about as specific as I can. Which, of course, I just want to say is a lot. I mean, it must be, oh boy, I don't even know. Past games that have maybe didn't really have a lot of variance, did they? Was there before the modders got a hold of them and injected more? Was it, I don't know, dozen, 15? So total. So we're talking about hundreds. So you're talking about at least a 10x fold increase. If a player wants to support you in the way that gives you the most profit, which platform should they buy on? Thank you. Appreciate the question. That's thoughtful and helpful. Obviously, it's our platform, like our portal. So when you buy it directly from Piranha, then there's it's the best. It's certainly I want people to use whatever platform they're comfortable with, but even if you buy with us, it's going to be a distribution of a Steam key anyhow. So really the kind of platform agnostic in this case. Unlike MWO, there won't be like a custom launcher type of thing. It'll be, okay, thanks for your purchase. Here's your key. So yeah, you buying from our platform is going to be the best for us. And after that, I guess a little bit more complicated to answer. And everyone knows the rates on Steam and everywhere else. And so it's been a rapidly changing marketplace out there. Things have changed a lot, with all this stir up with the Epic Store and everything. So as a developer, again, kind of hoping that pot continues to get stirred. Hopefully some of the other bigger online retailers will start to be more competitive in matching down their rates and things, and that will only be good for small developers like us. But yeah, certainly buying from our portal has always been the best for Piranha Games. Well, it's 11:01, and I see some good questions still, but they're long answers. So, well, this is man, there's a lot of questions left. So, this has been a great AMA. I think we're gonna have to call it here, though, and we've got plenty of time to have more of these, though. So, hang on to your question if it wasn't answered. Thanks to everyone to show up, and I'll be back at 6. And so maybe just show back up then and toss your question in, and maybe at 6 tonight. It's a different audience, so I try to treat it like a totally separate audience that like no one was there earlier in the day, but perhaps I'll be a little more pass over some questions to get to some maybe unique questions or something like that.
Great. Thank you so much, Russ. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you perhaps at 6 p.m. tonight, PDT. Also, if any of you guys also play MWO, don't forget that there's a faction play public test currently going until tomorrow. If you have a chance to jump on and give us some feedback, we'd really appreciate it.